Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for your time. It's really nice to see you here. And yeah, I'm just basically going to tell you a story about a failure, okay? Feel free to stop me at any time if you see something that you don't understand completely or it's written in a bad way, so I can actually clarify what's written there. But yeah, I hope this is going to be something that resonates with anybody in the room. So without further ado, sorry, I'm getting credit from your catchphrase. The talk is called "Don't Blame It on Kubernetes." My name is Federico Nardini. For ease, everybody call me Fed. I'm a technical product manager, and this is the story. So I have arranged this talk in a very specific way. Point 2 to point 6. Anybody familiar with that one? Raise your hand if you're familiar with that one. Yeah, it's a STAR technique. Don't worry, I'm not here to interview anybody. It's just something that I've used because it was fun to use, right? So, the prologue. Before we start, actually, there is a very important thing that I want to do because it's for fairness of everybody who has been involved in these projects and everything that I'm going to mention in this talk. And the thing I want to show you is this one. Anybody familiar with this wording? Raise your hands if you are. Good. I can see a couple of people. So regardless of what we discover, we understand and truly believe that everyone did the best job they could, given what they knew at the time, their skills and abilities, the resources available, and the situation at hand. This is called the prime directive. It's something that you usually use before starting a retro, especially if you are in a team where things have been a little bit, sketchy. So there's going to be some criticism, but you want to acknowledge that everybody who operated in this space did whatever they could to the best of the intentions they had. So, let's start with the real thing. The prologue. Mandatory. For me, Star Wars is like Christmas. I don't know. I'm linking the two things together. I know it doesn't really, fit, whatever. But a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It's actually not that long ago, this story I'm going to talk about today. It's between October 2017 and October 2021, I worked at Government Digital Service. In short, it's called GDS. People from the UK may be a bit more familiar, but for anybody else, in the UK, we got this beautiful thing that is called gov.uk. It's a website where you can actually find all the information about all the different departments of government. And GDS, Government Digital Service, is the people behind that website, plus many other services. From March 2018 to March 2019, I have been involved in a specific thing. I do apologize, it may be a little bit hard to read, but I'm just going to explain you very quickly what is this. EIDAS regulation. The acronym is Regulation on Electronic Identification and Trust Services. So, the European Union came up with this idea of exchanging digital identities between countries the same way you do with a currency, okay? So you could build your digital identity in your own European country, let's say Spain, for instance, and you could move to the UK, could move to Denmark, to any of the European countries being part of the EIDAS framework, and you could use your digital identity to access government services, saying paying taxes or registering for your national insurance number, or health services, or anything else that has to deal with government and uses these services. The UK was part of this. And to be fair, we were one of the main promoters of this regulation. We attended many of the very initial conferences and talks, and we contributed to write the regulation. Now, to be able to operate within this framework, because eIDAS in the end is a framework, we had to build three things. Obviously, we're talking about digital entities, so it's everything software related. So we had to build a verify eIDAS trust anchor. Then we had to build a deployment to the German middleware. And then we had to build the UK proxy node. I'm going to explain you very, very quickly. Going to touch very quickly on these things. So the first one, the eIDAS Trust Anchor, you can see the word verify. If any of you is familiar with verify, it's the UK version of the digital identity, which hasn't really gotten a lot of success, I have to say. But that's what we had in the UK, and we'll still have for a few services. A trust anchor is basically a system in which you accept and exchange hash keys and identifiers and all these kind of signatures so you can trust the other countries and vice versa. The German middleware was something mandatory because the first country to actually start was Germany. And Germany they have identity cards, like many other countries in the EU, but their identity cards contain a lot of sensitive data. Basically everything you can think of. National insurance number, health number, personal data, even tax data as well. So they had to be very careful in the way they were integrating their own identities. And so they basically produced a middleware that every country had to deploy hosted within their own infrastructure. And then the UK proxy node. The UK proxy node was unfortunately, a software that was meant to send the UK digital identities out in the EU, right? And with some sort of a cryptography security level. Now, to build the UK proxy node, we had to involve the National Cybersecurity Centre, NCSC for short, because of critical infrastructure. The problem is the UK digital identities are mainly based on a series of number of checks that have to deal with credit records and some other stuff. And the reason is because the UK doesn't have identity cards, passports are not mandatory, driving licenses are not mandatory either. So to verify that a person is who they claim they are, it's not straightforward. So these kind of components need to query and interrogate a bunch of databases which are not just the passport office or identity office. So the NCSC specifically had an issue on how we were planning to store the cryptographic keys. Remember, I'm talking about 2018. Let's say that ways of dealing secrets like Vault or AWS secrets management and stuff like that were not so evolved at that time yet. So there were still some layers for which NCSC wasn't very happy with that. So we had several meetings, because this is what you do when you don't know what to do, you just have meetings. And we had to completely rely on the expertise of the GDS site reliability engineering team. We had one. That team ended up creating a new state-of-the-art platform, a Kubernetes distribution called GDS Supported Platform, the GSP. Now, there was a few problems with that GSP. My team specifically, we were strongly skeptical for a few reasons. Kubernetes was perceived as a shiny new thing, but still very new. And to be honest, not many of our engineers had much experience of dealing with Kubernetes and deploying stuff on Kubernetes, and some of them not even really familiar with that. So for us, the platform had a high risk of being too complicated to interact and operate with. We were very concerned about that. And then the building of the platform itself was already taking 3 times longer than the original estimates that they were provided to us by the SRE team. So 3 major issues for us. Steep learning curve, bottlenecks that we were anticipating, and cost of delay to become even worse because we were not even scratching the surface of the deployment of our proxy node. The senior management gave us no choice. It's either the GSP or you build something better yourself. We could have built something different. Strong emphasis on could. We didn't really have time to do that. We had deadlines. We thought we'd had deadlines because the EIDAS framework was coming with deadlines also related to the whole Brexit process. So we had to be quick. We had to be fast. We had to put this thing in production very quickly to demonstrate that there was a goodwill from the UK government actually to be part of these communal exchanges, even in digital identities, as a goodwill that things were going all right. Then April 2019 came, and I moved to another team to build another critical infrastructure software serving a slightly different purpose. I'm not going to talk about that one today, though. Sorry. I don't know what's that. Software update. It's the beauty of the live streaming. So once again, senior management forced us to host it on the GSP. I mean, forcing probably is a bit of a strong word, but when you have no alternative, how would you define that? We just didn't really have any alternative, to be honest. So use the GSP, and it was considered the future. And everything else had to be deemed obsolete. So the plan was to actually eventually slowly migrating all the different services of GDS over to the Kubernetes platform and then get rid of everything else. Then, fast forwarding to January 2020, I moved to the, surprise, surprise, I moved to the site reliability engineering team, becoming the only product manager to lead that function. And I had to make everyone come to terms with reality, especially senior management. Now, what was the situation? So January 2020, I'm now on the other side of the fence. I'm going to spoil for a second the color coding that I'm using here through the presentation, because I want to stress some keywords. So being on the other side and the fence was one of the main problems, because unfortunately, our teams at some point developed a bit of animosity. And so it literally felt us against them and vice versa, which is a bad behavior because it shouldn't be the case no matter what you have to do. So being on the other side was literally like seeing the other part of the problem that I had no exposure before at all. So in the end, as I will show you in this presentation, I started to understand that the problems was not just for us as consumers of the platform, but specifically for the people that were running the platform. And then the fence is really representing like a physical object that separates the two teams that in an agile organization, you shouldn't really have, right? But hey, my day-to-day has suddenly become a constant firefighting situation. I had the two teams, the EIDAS team and the other critical infrastructure team, constantly chasing me, their product managers, hey, things are not working, this stuff is not running, we got customers that are really worried because we need to put this into production, production code was failing, pipelines were always amber in the best case scenario, green was a very, very rare sight. So it was a constant firefighting. I didn't know anything about that before on the other side of the fence. Kubernetes platform is super unstable. I've heard this multiple times, right? But that wasn't the problem. Very frequent incidents or degradation of service obviously was the result of having this platform that was unstable. And very skilled people slowly leaving the team, one after the other, sick and tired of having to deal with this situation. And this is one of the main problems. Because when you don't set a team for success, but you don't give enough opportunity to a team to actually test and iterate and test and iterate before you make them put something into production, you put a lot of pressure on that team. And it's unfair. It affects the mental health and well-being of the people in the teams. And then people leave. So the product teams as well, they were struggling a lot. They couldn't deploy anything onto the infra without strong support from the SRE team. Now, you may be familiar with the DevOps model. DevOps usually they help specifically the teams to deploy stuff over to production. SRE should be something a little bit different. You shouldn't really be going hand in hand with the developers of the product teams and telling them everything how to do, right? So they should be able to use the platform by themselves, but it was too difficult, right? Almost 90% of our capacity was spent on support requests from all the different teams, fixing issues, rolling nodes, and reconfiguring YAML files and Istio. This is no name and shame to those sort of technologies or companies, whatever you want to call it, but that were absolutely the main pain points for us, especially with YAML files and Istio configuration. It was a nightmare. Almost no new feature development. So that meant that, the only thing you can do is keeping the lights on the platform. And you just need to make sure that it's reliable enough so that you can provide a service to your users. No possibility to estimate anything with confidence. Now, I know, I'm a product manager. We are obsessed with estimates, I know. But we don't do this because we like to bother engineers with estimates. We do this because we are, at least in my opinion, I am the very first advocate of my team. And if I need to have a conversation with a stakeholder, I want to be able to understand, to have the confidence to say, look, this is the situation. This is how it's going to take us to move forward. It doesn't need to be story points. I actually don't like story points at all. It could be anything else, but for us, it was impossible to estimate anything. Like a task or a bug fix could take anywhere between 2 hours and 2 weeks. So the reality is that, unfortunately, the shiny cool thing, what we were defining the Kubernetes platform, became a monolith, something that, difficult to touch. And every time you were trying to touch something, you had to apply corrections and configurations to other parts of the thing. Now, my task. Senior management brought me to the SRE team, and they told me, fix it. What exactly? That was my counter-argument, because it was like 3 months down into the working with the team, and I saw all the things that I've showed you before. So you tell me, fix it, and I am going to reply, which part of that do you want me to fix? Where do we start? Where do we even start? Figure it out. That was the answer. I was like, okay, fair enough. Let's figure it out. So how can I figure something out when it's so difficult to understand, or even trying to, see what's the end of the tunnel, if you like? Well, as a team, we sat down and we talked about everything that was wrong, painful, and unsustainable. As myself, I sat down with the product teams and we talked about everything that was wrong, painful, and unsustainable. I'm stressing talking and unsustainable because those were the problems. Lack of communication, experienced from both sides of the fence, and the sustainability of the platform that we were operating, because it wasn't sustainable for anybody really, not for the operators, not for the users. We started gathering more data. Data is what I wanted, because I wanted to showcase that something was wrong, but we didn't really have a lot of data. So performance issues, helping each other. So we really started to work together, SRE team, product teams, all together, openly, honestly, with a lot of empathy, to get back to the previous talk from Jade and Carla. Like never before, right? So empathy brought the fact that listening to my users, I was considering them my users internally, like my platform team, and externally, all the product teams. Together with strong data, I had the right level of confidence to get back and take a hard decision. In less than 3 months, I got back to senior management and said, I know how to fix it. And they were like, how? You got to decommission it. We need to retire it. And the reaction, can you guess the reaction? This was the reaction. What do you mean we need to retire it? We spent 1 year and something to build, even before, we spent so much money and time to build this thing. Why do you want to retire it right now? Well, let's talk about the results. The evidence was so strong that eventually it was actually easy to convince the senior management to get the buy-in to retire it, because we really gathered a lot of data, we really gathered a lot of pain points all together, and we were able to show that, unfortunately, we were not able to maintain and sustain what was built in a manner that was good enough for the users. So 3 things helped out. One of the previous project sponsors was gone for good. I don't want to finger point to anybody with this talk, but the problem is that even if you are a project sponsor and you are convinced that your solution is the best solution ever in the world, try to please be humble, sit down and listen to the counter arguments of those things. Because you may be a genius, but then there may be a lot of problems that you are unaware of with skills available, people, processes, where your genius solution is not going to work. Migrating the other critical infrastructure software over to the GovUK PaaS. The other product team was listening to me very carefully, and they knew there was something wrong with Kubernetes platform, and they really started to get my own advice to actually migrate to another platform that we had. And they took my advice. And then Brexit. I'm going to get back to this one later on. So I built a roadmap and a strategy, because this is what product managers apparently do. It's, again, apologies. This is very, very tiny, but it's a roadmap on GitHub projects. Very high level, with very, very easy columns, in progress, delivered, the quarters of belonging. And as you can see, there was this thing here, complete the document check-in service migration to gov.uk PaaS. That's the other high critical infrastructure service that I was talking before. And then there is complete decommissioning of the GDS supported platform. So by building a roadmap, I was able to have those conversations with all the different stakeholders in a very, very easy way and clear way. And everybody really appreciated the transparency and the honesty. And we did it. We migrated everything. And we fully decommissioned the Kubernetes platform. It took 15 months. But it took 15 months because the product teams were not ready immediately to migrate to something else. They were really busy building their products. So we had to, meanwhile, maintain the platform. And meanwhile, taking into consideration that these 15 months, it compromises also the 3 months it took me to do the discovery and coming back to the management team and tell them we need to decommission it. The waste was stopped. And when we then migrated another thing to the PaaS, but this is another story. So, reflection. The GovUK PaaS was an already existing platform in use at GDS way before than the GSP, and it was super stable. The PaaS would have not satisfied a particular NCSC requirements, the one I was referring to before, but it could have if that feature was prioritized, but it wasn't because of decisions. The UK could not remain part of the EIDAS if no bilateral agreements were signed by the 31st of December 2020, and they didn't. So 6 months before that deadline, I started to say, okay, we need to decommission this anyway. I don't care if that product is still on that platform. It means that if we remain in the IRAS framework, we will do something else. We will do a service interruption for a couple of months, 3 months. We will migrate it to one of the other existing platforms. The reason why I took that decision is because there were not enough users using that product. It was a bit of a brutal decision, but when you have like 1,500 users comparing to the rest of the 60 million of people in the UK, that's what you do. You shut it down. Later on, the team was dismantled, but people were so upskilled by then on SRE that they got embedded in product teams as SRE experts. And the one that left and moved on to other things, they now work at AWS, Monzo, or other cool kids in the block. So key takeaways, very quickly. Be careful what you build for. The sheer irony of this whole story is that if any of you has ever been in GDS offices or seen GDS people and whatever, these are the stickers that we have on all our laptops. What is the user need? Ask yourself, what is the user need of the thing that you are trying to build? Ask yourself if that platform is going to fit the needs of your users. If it's not a yes, it's a no. It's not just about the technology. Don't blame it on a technology specifically. Like if you decide to build something on that technology and you don't upskill the people, you don't give training courses or training material to the people, it's very unfair to blame it on the technology and to the people. Make it sustainable. You need to make sure that what you build can actually run and without too much effort or cost. People, then processes. Consider the skills you have in-house, and then think about the process you want to build on top of that. Train, don't blame the people. It costs way less money to spend 30, 40, 50 grand training a bunch of 10, 11, 12 engineers for 3, 6 months, rather than spending 2 years building something that you need to throw in the bin. I can guarantee you that. Resist to the temptation of CV-driven development. CV-driven development is when you develop something that is going to look good on your CV. Oftentimes, that's not the best solution for the users. I'm just going to take, yeah. Picture? Okay, yeah, good. That's me. That's the end of the talk. If you want to find more about myself, you can look at that QR code. The other one is the jobs opening with container solutions. And I hope you're going to be able to share these presentations, the slide deck. These are all the links about the stuff that I've talked about. It's everything open in the public, because this has always been the main purpose of GDS, having everything open into the public. And the last thing I have to do is to thank you very much.